And welcome back to Zoom Back Camera, everybody, the online film forum of the Browning Cinema at the University of Notre Dame. At the top of our show, we have a statement that I like to read in order to get it correctly, as I do mean it. So I will do that right now. During these uncertain times that have moved us out of the physical Browning Cinema and into a virtual one, our thoughts are with those battling the virus, battling isolation, battling precarity, and battling the fear inherent to this moment. And alongside that, we want to extend our thanks and appreciation to the first responders, medical professionals, grocers, public transit workers, childcare workers, and everyone else on the front lines. Zoom Back Camera is a very small thing to offer, but we do hope these conversations about movies we love, and we love Paddington too, will buoy your day and continue the education, fellowship, and dialogue with which we like to bracket our films in the Browning Cinema. And as we like to do in the Browning Cinema, we often shake hands and say hello. Feel free to do that in the comments or in the chat. And if you have questions along the way, certainly leave them there as well, and we will try to get back to them as we do during our conversation. And now I get to finally, after that preamble, welcome one Liz Hynes, the Zoom Back Camera. Welcome to the show, Liz Hynes.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for choosing such a wonderful movie. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I graduated from Notre Dame in 2017, and now I live in New York, and I work on The Late Show. I'm the writer's assistant on The Late Show is my job.
Awesome. And were you always drawn to comedy?
Yes. I mainly have wanted to be a writer for pretty much as long as I can remember. And over time that narrowed into, oh, people need to write words on TV. And oh, sometimes those words are funny. And so for a while, it was an evolving thing, but yes.
And you picked a wonderful movie tonight. Thank you, Paddington 2. What was the first time you saw Paddington 2?
The first time I saw Paddington 2 was the summer right after we graduated, so 2017. And
when it came out.
When it came out in theaters, and I have a sister who's 12 years younger than I am. So we went to go see it together. It was like a 100-degree day. We didn't want to be outside, but we wanted to go do something fun. And I had heard a little bit when Paddington 1 came out, but nobody would stop talking about Paddington 2. And so I thought, this is convenient. We have some time. I hear nothing but great things about this movie. Let's go see it. And it was such a delight.
That's the word in a nutshell. This is a delight.
Yeah,
this Paddington 2.
I find myself using words to describe Paddington that I don't use to describe any other thing. It's just like so sweet and earnest and pure, and it's a treasure.
Yeah, like Pavlovas and like figure skating ingenues.
Yes, yeah.
It was my Paddington adjective box for this, this movie. And it's funny, were you a Paddington stan? Did you read the books? Did you know this character at all?
Yes, I knew the character, but always in a kind of removed way that was very much, oh, that's a British character, and I kind of know who it is, and I read some of the books, but not in the way that like British kids grow up with it.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to, for me, Paddington was a book that was on my shelf that I think I read once, and then I ate marmalade. I didn't like marmalade. I was like, I don't like that book.
Yeah.
So what?
The whole deal.
Yeah, seriously wonky. But he makes marmalade delicious in this movie. I'll let that be known. But what childhood book? I'm thinking like that is because Paddington was pretty dusty when the series of films comes out. What childhood book for you would you resurrect? What have you always been wanting to turn into a script?
I was obsessed with this mystery book when I was a kid called The Westing Game. And I believe Ellen Raskin was the author. And I don't think I ever read anything else that she ever wrote. But I loved this book. I read it like 50 times. And I didn't know if it was a movie, but then we looked it up. And it seems like it was, but nobody saw it. So it feels like it could be like Knives Out, but a little kid friendlier. Although I think Knives Out is pretty tame. Kids could see Knives Out.
Yeah, I think that's like a third grade birthday party movie.
Yeah.
I think Westing Game would be, I think it's time to revisit it. and maybe with a little bit of spin. I like a good mystery treasure hunt film for children. I think would go over very well. So if not the Westing game, get your own Northup, Southern, whatever their names are. Yeah, you can create your own code. But let's pop into Paddington 2, as there's a lot to unpack here, much like that little ladder that's just going to extend out of that suitcase. A quick note that when I did, so I first went to Netflix because I watched Paddington 2 multiple times on Netflix.
Yeah, same.
When I went to it and I searched for Paddington 2, they'll give you similar titles. And the thing that popped up was that Christopher Robin with that live action Pooh.
Oh, that's like, and that movie's not even, it's basically a gritty war flashback movie. It's not even a fun kids movie.
Yeah, so I thought I was going to see Paddington, and I saw that gross Winnie the Pooh, and I barfed. It was really gross.
No, I saw that movie on a plane, but not by choice. I was in like the very poor seats that just have a screen, and you don't get to choose whether or not you look at it. And my headphones weren't even working, so it was just subtitles, completely silent. I pretty much got what I needed to get out of it. I don't think it deserves more than that.
Misery? You got some misery?
There are a lot of brutal PTSD moments.
That's what you want to have a children's book, but that's not what we're getting out of Paddington 2.
Exactly.
And we meet it a few bear years ago. The real tough shoehorn bear puns and moments in this movie, I love them. I shouldn't, but I do.
Yeah.
And so we learned that there are bear years, and it happened a few years ago. And we meet an Aunt Lucy and an Uncle Pastuzo. Mm-hmm. And right out of the way, we got some heavy hitters in terms of voice acting. And we're going to see them throughout this movie. We're running through the English phone book of stars. You like the casting choices generally in this movie?
Absolutely. I mean, it does kind of re-solidify that belief that there are 10 British actors and they just cycle through every single movie together. But that's Dumbledore and Umbridge are the first people you hear. And it definitely sets the stage for, oh no, people are only going to keep getting more and more famous. And everyone committing 110%. Nobody is phoning in a single line in this movie. And it starts with the CGI bears. I buy them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it starts, I've counted. So this film made me cry 8 times in an hour and 42 minutes.
Yeah.
First time was that little Paddington.
Oh, he's so sweet. And the little hat falls on him right away. And
when that hat falls on him,
lifts up the little marmalades. I did notice when I watched it last night, I have no idea where the marmalade sandwich came from. You seem to see both his hands, marmalade free, and then when you lift up the hat, it's there. Maybe it was in the hat. It could be in the hat. It's pretend. I think
it was trickle down marmalade from Uncle Pastuzo at the top of the
big
stop.
Reagan supporter, Uncle Pastuzo.
Yeah. Well, he does have where the street, he sees London as where the streets are lined with or filled with marmalade and the streets are paved with bread. So he does have an idealized idea of London.
Definitely.
Which, whatever gets Paddington to London, I don't care. Pastuzo. Yes. The important thing is that he went. And we then arrive in London and we get an update on some of the family members, how things are going, and generally how Paddington, an outsider, obviously, previously has really integrated himself into polite London society. The social fabrics and the emotional bonds here are combined with a really alternative form of capital, which is his gift giving and returning. Yeah. And well, just generally, how do you see the message about how Paddington's fitting into that world, and does it work for you? Oh,
totally works for me. It's definitely a very idealized version of London. It's a total storybook come to life. And that's, you never see like a homeless person in Paddington. You don't see any of the vast inequality. They live on a street in Primrose Hill where that house went on the market for like 3.3 million pounds. So, but in a kids movie, you don't have to address that. what's important, I think, is that your protagonist operates in a way that if everyone were to behave like them, there would ideally be less inequality in the world. So teaching those kids that lesson of like just being considerate to your neighbors, of, you know, every day he gives somebody breakfast. The woman on the bike, she gives him a ride and he gives her breakfast. He helps his friend who is the guy who collects the bins, who's studying for the cab driver exam. He helps him study. And right off the bat, not only is Paddington's kindness making the neighborhood a whole well-oiled machine, but it immediately introduces that theme that keeps up throughout the film, that there is dignity in every kind of work, and Paddington treats everybody exactly the same. And that gets him into trouble later when he accidentally like offends people who are uppity, but it's because everybody is exactly the same to him. And to watch him just come into that like beautiful little clockwork storybook universe that's just a machine powered by kindness I was sold immediately. Yeah, totally works for me.
And Paddington's aware that he is gaining things from these people. I mean, he gets a ride from the person, the garbage truck worker.
Mm-hmm.
So if I get a ride, then I'll help you study. There's a collective going on in the neighborhood that he's brought about to.
Right, without ever feeling transactional. It's all very like, it's altruistic and symbiotic, but it never feels like this for that.
Mm-hmm. Well, like you said, it's clockwork. Like there's no space for it not to feel uncomfortable. And we find updates from the family, and you saw Paddington 2 before Paddington 1. So these updates were probably a little lost on you, right?
Well, I assume they were calling back to I've still never seen Paddington 1. I've seen Paddington 2. It's got to be like 6 times, and I have still never seen Paddington 1.
Paddington 1's great, by the way.
There's no reason for me not to watch it, but I think that actually might be easier to find than Paddington 2 right now. So I'll look into that. I should have watched it before we spoke, but is like J-Dog stuff calling back to, I'm assuming the steam engines were a big thing in Paddington 1.
You know, they're not huge. I mean, it's not huge.
Really?
Like it's pretty oddball, the updates that we're getting.
I was still on board.
Not natural arcs.
Maybe I gave it too much credit. It wasn't actually calling back to things that they'd set up. It was just crazy.
Do you have other films where you've either seen the sequel or not the original, or where you think sequels are better than the first?
This has become my gold standard of sequels that are better than the first. Another kids movie, Shrek 2, is better than the original. Mainly because of the fairy godmother, who is basically Hugh Grant. They basically have parallel storylines. Just realizing that is the same arc. Yeah, restore your old family glory. That's wow. Yeah, that's a different Zoom call. But I guess a lot of them are kids movies now that I think about it, because usually there will be whole sequels or whole franchises rather where I'll only catch one of them. Like I've only seen one Star Wars, I think. I've only seen one Bond film, only seen one Avenger, and I get the gist. So I can't comment on whether or not they're better because I haven't seen all of them.
And sometimes when you see them out of sequence, it makes you, like, I saw Gremlins 2 before I saw Gremlins 1. So I was expecting a very high concept, meta cinematic experience.
I have not seen them, but I know of the famous disparity in approach.
But it does have, but Paddington 2 is singular, but it does share a lot of qualities. It refines what's happening in the first. Let's say that.
Okay. I have to look.
Yeah, you'll get around to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you might have time nowadays. So we get the updates, and then we go to the curio shop owned by Jim Broadbent, Gruber, I believe is his name in it. And do you have a favorite curio shop place you go for consignment, or you just like shopping around?
I have, New York is tricky because I'm sure there are so many places that I don't know about, but it feels like the cool little places to wander downtown Like there's like a Housing Works bookstore, cafe, thrift place that I like there. There's the anti-imperialist bookshop in the Village, but the rent is so high in all those places that the objects feel like prohibitively expensive. And they're also not really, Gruber seems like in this movie, he has like a special relationship to all the pieces and he knows everything so intensely. And I don't really know anything like that in New York, but the best curio shop I've ever been to was a place in Rome where our friend Sofia Bavacqua was living. When we went to visit her, she lived around the corner from this place called, it was, I don't speak Italian, Polvere del Tempo, the dusts of time. And I have the thing I got. Oh, it is a little globe. And I think my friend John Salazar has one of these too. I've never used the virtual background. It's just a little globe and everything's in Italian. And the people there make it. And they had like that kind of folklorish Gruber relationship to all their pieces. And it was just so special. I thought I'm never going to get that anywhere else. So that's the best one I've ever been to. I'll probably never go back, but I loved it.
Was that in Trastevere?
Mm-hmm. Have you been there?
I've been there. Yeah.
To that shop with all the gold things in the ceiling? Isn't it so gorgeous?
It is gorgeous. It is.
It's so beautiful. Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah. And I looked it up before and it's temporarily closed because of, so I hope they reopen.
We have another crying moment that happens in the Gruber shop. This will be a theme. And that is a popping book, which jarring whenever I hear that. It's a pop-up book, but a popping book that comes to life, and Lucy and Paddington inhabit that space. Thoughts on how majestic and perfect that scene was?
Yeah, those are the two adjectives, essentially. The animation there is so beautiful, and I think that when we talk about the best animated movies of the past few years, there's obviously like Into the Spider-Verse and another one I said before that I don't remember, but Paddington deserves to be on that list because it is so fitting with the film's aesthetic, but it's so special and so singular. And he just loves Aunt Lucy so much. He loves London so much. I love London so much. When I was living there the whole time, I just thought, I can't wait for my family to come see this. You said that you felt the same thing when you were at Cambridge. Like when you fall in love with a place, all you want to do is share it with people. And so that whole him he takes her around the storybook version of London, and it literally is a book in this scenario. So you want the people you love to see that idealized version of the place you love, and they just nail it.
And in keeping with there's a lot of positive articulation, both by Paddington and around Paddington. And when Aunt Lucy says, "You've made an old bear so very happy," it's like, oh, these are functional adjusted relationships.
Yes. Yeah. So much feedback. Like very just beautiful, constructive, honest, a lot of dialogue happening. It's all very healthy.
And Paddington has a way of being, this is, we were talking before a little bit how it's a Rube Goldberg machine. This is an efficient storytelling machine. And we needed Paddington to get to work, and now he has motivation to get to work because he wants to buy that. And he finds work in a barber shop. Thumbs up to this scene.
Big thumbs up for this scene. It's so precious. It's so silly. And I will always have a soft spot for this scene because the physicality of it and the animation is so funny, the Rube Goldberg element. But my sister was just dying laughing at this. And I will always remember her like little kid laughter, just like uncontrollable when he's buzzing with the thing and when he's flying from the ceiling fan, just all of it, just like it's constant escalation, and the kids' reaction in the theater like match that. Sometimes a scene goes too far off the top and you lose even your kid audiences.
Or just a little off the top.
Yeah, but this just a little bit. Just tidy up the back, but this ratchets it up in exactly the right way. And I love going back to that theme of like the dignity of work. Paddington is so proud to be there, and before the judge comes in after Mr. Giuseppe leaves, he like rehearses with the broom how hospitable he's going to be and how well he's going to take care of whoever walks in, but then he's not actually ready to do it. And it's just so sweet. He tries so hard.
And we didn't spend any time on getting Paddington a very small child barber coat, which we don't,
Yeah.
I don't need to see that Taylor scene. But the idea that all of this happened, like how much the world has conformed to Paddington,
Oh
like there's
yeah.
so much work being done around him in order to make him feel comfortable that whenever I see things like that, I'm like, they spent so much time trying to find a child's barber coat for that little thing.
Yes. Part of this seamlessness of the world is that everyone seems to have been alerted to the fact that Paddington's there. And it's like, be ready. You don't know when or if he's going to come, but you better be ready.
you better have a child's barber coat for him. Otherwise, you know. We then, so that's his first foray into work. Not successful. But then we head to the fair where we meet Phoenix Buchanan and various updates. Oh, real quick. So we did have, talking about J-Dog in the update, did you ever reinvent yourself
Yeah, it kind of felt like,
from movie to movie as a child?
oh, definitely from movie to movie. Just like personality was 50% whatever the last piece of media I consumed was. And we talked about both of us have like large age gaps between us and our siblings. And when you don't have anyone your own age in your own house, there's no barometer really for what's normal. So you kind of test things out around people around you. And I went to school with the same 20 other kids for the first like 10 years of my life. And one week in 5th grade, I just decided I was going to speak with the British accent. And I had not switched schools. These were all the same people that had always known me, and they just put up with it. I'm still friends with some of them, and I don't know why they're still friends with me, because that's an insane thing to start doing and to commit to for a week.
Did you fool them?
Oh yeah, I was like, this is my twin. We parent trapped ourselves. I'm lonely at home. Just kidding. Great relationship with my parents. Everything was fine.
So we get the establishment of Hugh Grant. We have him working opposite Paddington, who is at the height of his Amelia Bedelia.
Oh yeah.
And then we see Paddington end up into, so he's begun his second career as a window washer. And this is the extending ladder suitcase, various gadgets about him. What do you think how do you put the time in this movie? Because sometimes it feels very modern, other times it feels anachronistic. Did you have a sense of that through the film?
Yes. And I don't know why I assumed from the top that it was set in present day, because the only time that it's really almost jarring you to the present day is in J-Dog's outfit. They nailed what, I don't really know any like boys that age right now. Even all my younger cousins they're either babies or they've aged out beyond that. So, but I know some part of me knows that that's what they dress like. And so to see that was like, oh no, this is today. But no one ever uses a cell phone. Even when the plot necessitates a phone, they go into the kitschy phone booth and the London landmark, which they all smell like piss, but the kids seem to be okay with it. So yeah, I don't think that you ever see anything that's not this very like twee kind of Mary Poppins piece of, well, she's magic. Paddington's not magic.
Yeah, vehicles, I guess.
Yes.
And, like the vehicles can jar, but otherwise, no. It's a very storybook world, right?
Right.
All in all. And when we get to window washing, again, I cried.
Oh, it's so nice.
Rub and scrub,
So
that
nice.
calypso music. Oh, how can you not?
The
have
soundtrack is phenomenal. That band, like Tobago and D Lime, I think they are.
Yeah.
I only know them from Paddington, but the soundtrack for the entire time, and the end of that scene when I love that weird like they cross the diegetic non-diegetic thing all the time, which is my favorite thing that a movie can do. When Paddington is washing his neighbor's windows, and it's all plot too, because the mean cop yells at him. He clears out the colonel's window, and that enables him to fall in love with Jessica Hynes. And so everything that he does is also plot. But then
Jessica
at the end,
Hynes, that's your fifth grade
yeah,
parent trap, right?
that was my twin, spelled the same way. We yeah, we're related. When Paddington is watching Mr. Brown's thing, and then it's revealed that he's on the Shard, and the whole band is with him. They're all on a window washing thing properly together. I mean, that's so gorgeous. This is so gorgeous. I just love that scene so much. It's so wholesome. He's working for his money that he needs. It's so honest. It's so pure. Even when the Colonel says he's not going to pay him, he goes, perhaps I'll just do them anyway. He's just the best little cub.
He is. He is. Did you have a window washing, weird, menial, like, childhood job, lemonade stand, anything like that?
I feel like I did a lemonade stand once or twice, mainly just like for fun. But I would do chores and stuff if there was something that I wanted, and my parents were like, okay, well, do this and we'll pay you for it. And then eventually you'll earn your way up to the thing. But most of the time they were just for fun. I was a cashier eventually. That wasn't so fun.
No.
No.
But Paddington generally seems to like his work.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, as we're mentioning before, the end pursuit of buying the storybook, which on the eve of him buying it, it is stolen from Gruber's. And there is a elaborate, say in a word, chase sequence. Did you like that chase?
I loved the chase, especially because I'm assuming that you have walked along the docks of the canal in Camden. They're so narrow, and people really do go so fast on their bicycles or with strollers with babies inside them who can't swim, to my knowledge. And so that is one of my favorite walks in the world, but I am always so anxious if I do it myself. So that added to that, like, this is exactly what that would feel like. This actually would be extremely anxiety inducing. And it's sort of a fun mirror image to Paddington's clockwork commute to work in the morning, but with more anxiety and hostility in the pursuit, because the dog, Wolfie, happens to be there. And then they go through a bush and now he's holding a goose, and it is its own little hectic clockwork of its own. And it doesn't work in the end, but I thought it was great. And Hugh Grant's like insane accent that he puts on too is like, he commits to his character within his character. He's not just in a disguise. He's doing like the old gruff accent, and it's the best.
Well, saying on Hugh Grant, we then head to his lair, or the attic space. Thoughts on that, or how they unpack the mind of Phoenix Buchanan?
Oh yeah, so like playfully schizophrenic maybe, and or just such a narcissist that he becomes everything he's ever played.
I did write in my notes the first time. Phoenix Buchanan is a weirdo. When
so
we were
weird.
in that
That's
space.
what Mr. Brown says when they find the attic.
He comes up and says he's a weirdo. I was like,
weirdo. That's the perfect word.
Bingo.
It's absolutely insane. But that's the BAFTA nomination right there, is him being all of them at once and interrupting himself, and the way that is directed and the camera moves around each of them I love all the scenes of him in the attic. And it's just, I have never seen Hugh Grant be so silly on his own. I genuinely didn't know that he was capable of that as an actor, because he's always like self-effacing and stuff, but it's always in response to something. He always, there's like a pretty lady, or he has a scary boss, or Nicholas Hoult is his fake son. And he's always playing off someone, but I have never seen him do that range just alone. And I was so impressed. He deserved the BAFTA. He deserved to win.
Mm-hmm. He deserved the Oscar. This movie deserves so many Oscars, but that's, another story. Paddington then enters into the justice system. He is arrested, has a perp walk around his neighborhood. That is another point at which I cried. And he then has a trial with this is the moments where the much more childish elements really come forward. His judge is the person who he gave the poor haircut to. And he then is sentenced to prison. One quick note though, when Hugh Grant says prison is no laughing matter, and I should know I spent 3 years in Les Miserables.
And the courtroom loves it.
The courtroom, that's the best part.
Laughing. Like, Phoenix.
We just did, we were talking about Waiting for Guffman last week, and the importance of crowds laughing to make you know that you should laugh in general community theater places. And when they break out laughing, loved it.
It's the best part. Everybody but Mrs. Bird. Mrs. Bird hates him. She's rolling his eyes, but everybody else loves him. Again, the commitment from everybody. Stellar.
Top to bottom. Top to bottom. So Paddington gets sentenced to jail.
For 10 years.
10 years. We'll unpack that sentence in a little bit. He does head to jail for 10 years. And whenever I we showed this film, I wrote copy for it. I would talk about how it exposes the British prison industrial complex. Which I know is a joke, but I think there's actually a lot there about prison life. Did you have a big takeaway from how they construct the space or the relationships within the space? And real quickly, very weird to go to jail in a kid's film. So how do you do that well?
Yeah, I can't think, I know it must have been explored before, but always I feel like usually when prison is explored in a kid's film, it plays off a lot of kind of ugly tropes that adults have. And what I liked about this was they do have the instant hostility when Paddington asks someone to start a gardening club and he says, how'd you like to be buried in a very deep hole? Like, well, that's close. This is the start of gardening. You're almost there. But they also, the way they shoot the prison is exactly the way they shoot Mr. Brown's big scary corporation. So
good point.
That capitalism is a prison. That's their words, not mine, in camera movement. But so they do play off a little bit of that at the beginning. But what I love about them, and this is my background, that even when Paddington is accidentally and on purpose making the place more homey, it's never painted as being like effeminate or that the men are feeling like threatened in any way, which are really, I think, ugly things that adults think a lot of the time. And they're just so, it goes beyond like homophobic. They're just like hideous jokes made about prison all the time. And it's really difficult to get people to care about prisoners. And especially in a situation right now, they are some of the most vulnerable members of society, and people write them off as like, you did something wrong one time and you got caught, so you deserve it. And many of them didn't even do that. But besides the point, what I loved about this was that it doesn't play into any of that. It's always, some of them are silly, but they're silly because they're silly. The accidents that Paddington gets into, it doesn't feel weighed down by all these other gross things that we tend to bring to our reading of, what it's like to be in prison. And it just all is perceived as being ultimately more humanizing and just allowing people to have a full life in prison and have interests that are not, even they're all turned pink right now. And the same guy who says, do you want to be buried in a deep hole, just says, oh, if you talk to Knuckles, maybe we'll forgive you for making us look like a bunch of pink flamingos. And it's not gendered. It's not really that hostile. It's just silly. And I like that they could make these jokes work without playing into anything gross.
Mm-hmm. They somehow went into the really musty tropes and played with them in a way that erased a lot of the hate.
Yeah.
Which is tough to do. I mean, that's tough to do. And it might fall differently for other people. I think it did it as well as any other kids movie I've seen in a very long time.
Exactly. It's like ultimately it's always going to be made for kids and not the most nuanced we might love, but I thought it was a nice way to even get kids to care about, in theory, prisoners that exist. Like, anything we can do to help that is good.
We do meet Knuckles, and my favorite joke in the movie is the interaction with Knuckles and Paddington and the ketchup and mustard. And then he says, he's just doing this. He's like, oh no, that's just rubbing it in. And people who flatly note their mistakes is a great gag. But thoughts on Brendan Gleeson?
Well, he should also be BAFTA nominated. I mean, Hugh Grant steals the show, of course, but Brendan Gleeson is in it almost as much, if not the exact same amount of screen time. But he is fantastic. He's playing like a cartoon version of all of his characters. He's often cast as like a really gruff guy. And the choices that he makes, even his own face acting, I don't want to jump ahead actually. I think we're going to get to that in a minute. So I'll save this note. But he is phenomenal. His body language when he's reading the newspaper, when he's forcing Paddington to make all the marmalade, just the choices that he makes are so funny. And again, more than I knew that he was capable of as an actor, because I'm sure, what is Paddington on set, like a tennis ball on a stick or something? And Brendan Gleeson has a lot of one-on-one interaction with him, definitely more than Phoenix does, I think. Definitely, like I've measured it. I don't know. It feels that way to me. And I think that he just knocks it out of the park. He's so good. And he did, as far as I know, he didn't get nominated for anything. It's like there was only room for Hugh Grant in all the nominees. And maybe Hugh Grant has a better agent. I don't know. But he's fantastic.
Has an agent who likes his buns. Maybe that's why he got all the noms.
She also should be in it more. She was great. I love Joanna.
And this is something we'll probably talk about. But I also like the Night of the Hunter reference, the Cape Fear Knuckles. Like small things that it's not like Shrek where you have, I'm not to dump on Shrek because there are a lot of positive things in Shrek, mainly Donkey. But a lot of times when you have films that are intergenerational, there is the joke for adults is one that is biting, and the fact that kids won't get it gives it pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't seem to be what's in play in Paddington. It's a different type of, there are two wavelengths of enjoyment, but it's not like one is making you laugh or feel good as the adult because you know the kids don't get it. And that's why you get a laugh.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, it's almost like you want to have it both ways. You want to have both groups coming to see it and watching it together, but then you pit them against each other in a way. And Paddington never does that. Even when there's, in that scene when Paddington first meets Knuckles, one of my favorite moments is when the warden is like, send a medic to the canteen. And then once he's rumming it in, he goes, forget the medic, better send a priest. And my sister knew what that meant. I guess, I don't know if she just learned about last rites, but she understood it too. And she thought it was funny. And that's probably like the darkest joke Paddington makes, but it still doesn't feel like it's at the expense of the kids my sister's age, at least, watching, like 10, 12 years old.
Right. Yeah, the jokes are, it's, yeah, like you said, not pit against one another. And more kids' movies need to realize that, because that early 2000s, the lessons of Shrek, I don't know, we need to unlearn them, I think, personally. But we then head out and we get the history of Kozlova's, talking about dark things in a kid's movie. We get a murder.
And it said so casually, just like the flying swan became the dying swan, and she falls brutally off the trapeze. We don't see all of it, but wow.
Yeah, that's heavy. That's heavy. And also the flashback where so these are the flashbacks are often used as set pieces that then are going to pay off later. And in this case, you have, I'm sorry, I don't remember the dad's nickname, like Fastball McGraw.
Bullseye Brown.
Bullseye Brown, thank you. Brown. I like that flashback. Are you a Boney M fan? Did you ever listen to them?
No, I only know Daddy Cool from this movie, and that flashback to me is only worth it because of that song. So I guess I am a fan. Yes.
Give them a listen. They have a lot of historical like disco songs. So Rasputin and Ma Baker, like they take historical figures and give you their life narrative.
Chicago.
What's that?
Ma Baker's from Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I think my dad has played me that song. Actually, I think I do know that song.
Oh yeah, it's a great pickup for the movie. It's a great, and another one of those like kids will be like, oh, that's a weird song, and adults are gonna be like, ooh, they put a Boney M song in. Nice touch for a big movie like this. We then see Paddington and Knuckles make us some marmalade. So good. It's another window washing. It's in the work,
Yes.
the labor, the process.
Exactly. And it's all done out of love. Even though Paddington's in a terrible situation, he's like happy he can share this thing he loves with everybody. Knuckles does not want to help, and he reads that again, the fantastic newspaper, and it has those
Good times.
headlines. Yes. What was the one that you sent? Which headline?
Something like judge refuses get out of jail free card.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's another one that's like dry cleaner accused of laundering money and a deal is being ironed out.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
just it's delightful.
They do an excellent job of infibulating the edges and just putting the small jokes in those spaces. And sometimes it's a prison pun, sometimes it's more often than not a bear pun. But
Yeah.
they're very careful about the small pieces, and
Right.
that goes a long way.
Just backed up on the little details.
Do you have a marmalade recipe? Like if people are coming over or you have to entertain, something you make for people that goes over well?
That's such a nice question, and I'm old enough where I feel like I should have a better answer. I like making guacamole. I don't cook that much. I like making guacamole, and I am pretty good at determining, assuming you don't have the gene that makes it taste like soap, I can determine the pretty close to perfect ratio of cilantro to put into guacamole. So that'll be my answer. Maybe someday I'll have a better one.
Guacamole feels like it's in the marmalade world too. That's a good answer. We then have them serve the marmalade. It goes over well. Again, taking the materials around them and living in the world and then pulling them into what's happening. For example, of course, Paddington, being the resourceful bear he is, would have a giant serving fork with an orange on top of it that he hits as a gong. They were very, very careful in thinking of these details. We then see the improvement of the prison. What'd you think about that? Love Thy. That's the other Calypso song, the "Love Thy Neighbor" moment when
best song.
prison's refurbished.
Yes, love that. Love the whole scene. That is the Knuckles moment when he's waiting to hear what they think. And he's like, I don't care what they think. What are they saying? Do they like it? And then just what he does with his face when he's like, I have no idea what this feeling is. And Paddington tells him that it's pride. And he's scowling and then he can't help but smile. And then he scowls again. And then it's so good. It's so sweet to watch. Brendan Gleeson, man, he's the best. But then, yeah, that gives way to the whole sequence. And it's lovely. I think it's really, really sweet. And again, doing these little homey touches, but it's never made to feel like, oh, they're doing stuff. They're all in pink. They're doing like girl things. It's never like that. It's just, this is their home for now. And they're taking care of their home and they're helping each other. And I love when Paddington tells someone like, what does Aunt Lucy always say? These people don't know Aunt Lucy, but they know her lessons because he shares them with them. And it just is it's a real sweet arc for all of them.
Mm-hmm. And there is the surreal makeover, I think, is an intelligent way to go with it too. Just making it so big to the point where they have a maitre d' heading into this cake shop that they've constructed.
And they all share recipes. I love that scene where they all get up and the toughest guys that were threatening Paddington's life a minute ago were saying, oh, I know how to make a rhubarb. And I'll share it with you guys.
Yeah, something. And we then get plans a hatching. So the Browns have thoughts on trying to get into Phoenix Buchanan's house. Paddington's looking to get out of the prison. Oh, coming back around, I didn't ask you before. If you were to see a show with Phoenix Buchanan, what show would you see him in? If he could star in anything.
Sunset Boulevard. He's Norma Ray. 100%.
A musical?
Yeah. They're going to make it a musical. He can't help himself. He would have to make it a musical.
Yeah. I mean, you can open up kind of the Glenn Close stageography and
Oh
work for
yeah.
her roles, and it'll map pretty closely. So then this plan is taking place. Paddington's out. The Browns have discovered that Buchanan is nefarious and guilty.
Mhm.
And Paddington then tries. Oh, I must have missed something because, well, regardless, we've also had some. I missed moments we've cried, which would be like when he cries and in the prison, and then
Oh, when
the
they miss
jungle builds
visiting
up.
day. Yes. Yes. I appreciate that more every time I see it, because it's very much like, even once you're in a place and it's your new home and you love it, something goes wrong and you miss your old home. And I don't think I'd felt that the first time that I saw the movie, but since then I moved to New York and was temporarily very broke and very much missing New Jersey right across the river, closer than Paddington's rainforest. But I appreciate that scene more every time I watch the movie. It's really, really lovely.
And that it's pretty too. I mean, this is
It's
something that
gorgeous.
can't be lost, is how nice this movie looks. And the escape that we then have, I mean, I'll always love elaborate escape schemes and
Mhm.
elaborate theft scenes, right?
Yep.
Did
They always their
you
way out of
did
it.
you did you like the let's crack him out of jail, how they went about it?
Loved it. It was, you pointed out, very Wes Anderson-y, probably more than any other scene in the film. It's still
And
very,
Wes Anderson directed the rest of the movie, so
yeah, yeah. They passed the baton halfway through. He picked it up, but it's still very true to character. Like Paddington stealing sandwiches on the way out, and
he's so hedonistic. I love that.
he can't resist it. He's like, it's like Pooh Bear with his honey. He just can't resist the marmalade.
Yeah, but not that gross Christopher Robin.
Not that one. We hate that Pooh. We hate that one.
But yeah, I mean, he is in a healthy conversation with his id, Paddington.
Mm-hmm. That's the perfect way to put it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the escape. So the escape works for you?
The escape does work for me. And it also goes back to what we were saying earlier about how it's kind of difficult to place temporally, because there is no tech used besides the huge like clock that Paddington slides through. There's nothing. It's just, this is where our laundry is and this is how we get out. And we use a hot air balloon. Even the plane they use later is like a propeller plane. It's impossible to tell what year this is happening in. But absolutely works for me. And I loved that the guy who was so mean the whole time, he sees them going away and he's not even mad that they didn't invite him. He's just like, good luck, little bear.
Yeah, that is sweet. It's a great moment. Yeah, the hot air balloon, not the most discreet escape vehicles.
You can see them miles away flying from the jail. Oh my God, you know what we didn't talk about? Do you know where they filmed part of Paddington 2, even though most of it was on a set?
No.
They filmed part of it in Kilmainham jail.
Oh, really?
Where the hunger strikes were, where Bobby Sands died. They filmed part of Paddington 2, the prison sequences in there. So if you go on a tour there, they'll be like, this is where 12 members of the IRA starved themselves to death after being unjustly imprisoned by the British Army, and also where Paddington 2 was filmed.
Oof. That's a heavy palimpsest.
Yeah.
But again, and it's not that again, the fact that Paddington's willing to take up these worlds and bring them in and have those arcs be part of them in a way that is a caricature, but a positive one, I think is something that is a space where many films wouldn't go. So a credit to that. Credit to that. And we then have, so Paddington ultimately is reuniting with the Browns, and we are getting set up for the large chase sequence at the end. Before we get there, we have a couple of things happen. First of all, Mr. Curry ups the panic level and the Volvo won't start, even though it looks like it's a very nice Volvo and the community needs to push that. Thoughts on this, what it says to you?
That that whole scene was very much like, oh, I thought that he got redeemed at the end until I watched it last night. I thought he had a moment of like, oh no, I'm on board with Paddington, but he actually never does. But this is still the superior movie that came out that year about a racist cop who is eventually triumphed over or sees the error of his ways. The other being Three Billboards. And guess who Hugh Grant lost the BAFTA to? It was Sam Rockwell. So Curry is the Sam Rockwell of this movie, but that part, that's actually a part where I cry, when all the neighbors come together and they help them push the car away. Any like community coming together against one bad thing in search of a greater thing always makes me cry. I love that moment. And before that moment, the other villain of the street is when Mrs. Brown goes into Phoenix's flat for the first time, or his house is bigger than a flat. It's massive. But when the shot when they pan up and it's all Hugh Grant's actual younger headshots, I screamed in the theater. That was one moment that my sister and I did not share because she doesn't really know who he is apart from, no, she does because she knows Love Actually. But I shouted. That was my favorite detail of the entire movie. And again, surprised that he was game to make fun of himself so much.
But he's good sport. Good sport.
Very good sport. But then yeah, fast forward, Curry, much less likable villain. At times feels kind of like unnecessary. But in that scene, he was a really great direct opposition to everyone else on the street coming together.
And are you a Doctor Who fan? Do you read him against his Doctor Who character?
I used to be, and I did watch some of it while he was still on. So what does it go? It's like him, Tennant, Matt Smith, or Tennant, Matt Smith, him. I don't remember.
I'm not a fan.
That was around, it was the three of them in some sequence in a row, and that was around the time I was watching it. So I know him from that, but mainly the thick of it is what I juxtapose him with. So the whole time in Paddington, I'm waiting for him to like launch into Armando Iannucci awful logorrhea, and it doesn't happen.
Winning word of the 1999 National Spelling Bee, logorrhea.
Really?
Really?
Logorrhea?
Yeah, I think. No, I don't know. I can't spell. I just follow him. But he looks like my con law professor from law school.
Really? Did you like that professor?
Sure. But he was like he was like kicked out of Juilliard, so he's also very performative. So it's kind of this Hugh Grant meets Mr. Curry character.
Wait, your law professor was, or Capaldi was kicked out of Juilliard?
My law professor. And so, but he looks like Mr. Curry, and so it was coming up throughout the movie, like, oh, there's a lot of connections there. Before we get into the last sequences, we did have a question can you explain the Wes Anderson reference a bit?
Oh yeah. Just because
what for you said Wes Anderson in this movie? Scenes or vibes or aesthetics?
Definitely the aesthetics, the color palette for all of it is very, I would say actually, Wes Anderson to me works more in like a consistent palette, whereas Paddington, just the whole vibe of the movie is kind of just like, let's make it pretty. So there's not as much of a color template with Paddington as there is with the Wes Anderson film, but particularly in the escape scene, like you mentioned, all the shots are very centered. All of the kitschy little Rube Goldberg, like this is how we're gonna, there seems to be no technology in Wes Anderson movies either, for the most part. They could kind of be set anywhere. But there's always a little caper, and whenever there is a caper, you kind of get into like the tactility of whatever they're doing. So like the inner workings of the clock, or it seems like in every Wes Anderson movie, there's a scene where they like lay out all the props for whatever they're gonna do. And in Paddington, they sort of collect them on the way, but the end result is still this hot air balloon that's made out of their clothes and wherever they stole I don't remember what they got to make the fire, but it's that little kind of like accumulation of trinkets along the way, and then to pull off this little hijink thing felt very Wes Anderson to me. And the fact that he just centered a lot of the shots in that sequence. perfectly.
And I think it's because, and it may not be a direct Wes Anderson reference. I think a lot of it is pretty close to quoting, if not rhyming. But when you are doing things in a twee manner that is also somewhat formalist, for example, having cross sections of buildings and inhabiting sets and showing that in a way through the film, like we do in the prison, or like the pop-up book scene feels like it could be a Wes Anderson thing, even if it's not, down to the font that they use looks like the Wes Anderson.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So. And yeah, that last point you made is what Wes Anderson movies are, or his sequences, maybe not the movies as a whole, are very much about people's relationship to space and how they like move through it and what they take from it and what they leave in it. And Paddington as a character feels like that's very important to him. Just whatever space he's in, even like you said earlier, just he influences and it seems to just bend itself to his existence completely. And the prison sequence uses that as a very literal like plot device. How they're interacting with the space is so crucial to how it's shot and to get him out of there.
And there is something, I think I'm just like putting this through my head because I didn't see the connection as much in terms of the aesthetics, but I think you could find probably some connections between Max and Rushmore and Paddington.
Yeah. I like that.
Earnesty and drive and self-belief, and Paddington is a little more, he has a higher efficacy than Max, but there's something to that. Liking doers, I think.
Yes. And winsome, I think, is the adjective you used on maybe our earlier call, and that's like, that nails it for me. That's their whole deal.
Mm-hmm. And let's get into the big finish. So we have the Browns in pursuit of the circus. We have Paddington, and they converge at the train station. Before we get there, we see little RTD2 Paddington in a bin.
He's so cute. He's so good at it.
And he says so. He says, I'm good at being a bin.
Good at being a bin.
Which he's not. He's not. He's talking.
He says thank you when someone throws something in him. And immediately, I think after that, it's like, yeah, I'm good at this.
Yeah. And the cop is like, oh, sure, why not? Sure. The bin would talk. But the final sequence, you get circuses, you get trains, you get converging storylines, generally a pretty high wire act. How'd you feel about it? What were your favorite parts? When did it work for you?
I liked it a lot. I thought it was a pretty neat bow to pull on everything. I mean, Jonathan comes back to steam trains and they
dormant for a second.
They hijack a steam train to drive alongside it.
Sure.
That seems like, how are they the only people who don't get a 10-year sentence in this movie? They literally stole a train and a child was driving it. Anyway, it's that. It incorporates Sally Hawkins diving stuff at the end. It's I loved when Phoenix corners, or vice versa, Mrs. Bird, Mr. Brown, and Judy, when they all meet him and he has his he pulls a sword and he says stage combat level 4, and then Mrs. Bird says like, oh well, you shouldn't bring a knife to a gunfight, and she pulls out a gun and Phoenix says you'll find that fires plastic darts, and to test it she shoots one here and it is a plastic dart, but Mrs. Bird was planning to point blank execute Phoenix Buchanan. That seems insane.
Yeah, that's wild.
Kill shot. She didn't know that it was plastic darts then. She was aiming to kill. She's ruthless.
Yep.
This lady from Mamma Mia, what is she doing shooting people in the forehead?
Well, she needed to find out. And the only way you do that is to pull the trigger. Mm-hmm. And we, like you said, I mean, we get the the bullseye comes back, the journalist comes back to die. So the potluck character curiosities are all paying off at this point. Like, okay, everything needs to gel and come together. That suitcase ladder comes back again, which is great because I love that thing.
It's so good.
And ultimately, as things are being resolved, Paddington is left off the track and launched underwater. How are you feeling about it?
I mean, it's not unusual in a kids movie for the protagonist to be in severe danger and to maybe think they're going to die for a second and then they get saved. What is singular?
Like what makes you like, what films come to mind there?
I'm thinking of like every Disney movie I've ever seen.
Okay,
I mean,
right. Okay, yeah.
Like, I can't think of anything because I'm thinking of all of them. In like The Little Mermaid, she almost dies like 4 times, and Beauty and the Beast, they all almost die at the end, and just everybody always almost dies. But what's unusual is to have that moment where when Mrs. Brown and Paddington are struggling to get it open, and they realize they're not going to be able to do it, and they just look at each other and know that Paddington is going to die for a second. Spoiler alert: Paddington does not die in Paddington 2, but that moment is like very profound for a kids movie, and they did that in like Toy Story 3, I think, too. So not every Disney movie ever. One Disney movie did have that moment, but when they're like going to be incinerated and they just hold hands, like, this is what we're going to do. That is very deep for a kids movie, and I think hits the adults in the room watching it harder for sure. But it was profound. And then Knuckles and everybody crashes their helicopter into the river, and they do save him.
But that is when Paddington has visibly made his peace with death.
This one last little bubble comes out.
And says to Mrs. Brown, ostensibly, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
They put you up against that line. Oof. But things do work out. He zonks out for 3 days after all of that stress.
I feel like that's something that only happens in films. Like, he's not even in a hospital. He's just home in bed for 3 days. That sounds awesome. But everyone I know that's happened to was in like a medically induced coma in a hospital.
Yeah, it's, he hibernates. It's probably part of.
Oh, that's a good point. He is
part of his DNA. And when he wakes up, he has a reunion with Aunt Lucy. And I mean, you mentioned before it takes a village to start a Volvo, and how it takes that same community to get Aunt Lucy there. Did it wallop you?
Oh, completely. First of all, the delivery of every line and just how gentle everyone is with him. And it's like, don't worry. His first instinct is, I disappointed Aunt Lucy. He does not care that he almost died. It's immediately like, oh my God, it's Aunt Lucy's birthday. I don't have anything for her.
So thoughtful.
And everyone just like gently telling him to relax, come downstairs. Everyone you love is here, including Aunt Lucy. And I mean, that for me is the point of the whole thing. Everything that Paddington loves, he only loves it or only expresses it by sharing it with other people. Like, why love anything if you can't share it with other people? And this is his pop-up book dream come to life more than he ever thought possible. He can come share his favorite place with her. Everyone he loves is under one roof right now. It is just the absolute best. And I loved watching it last night because what's so hard right now is that we can't really share anything with each other. And we're all just living in individual pods, and that's not how human beings are supposed to live. And ideally, when we come out of this, maybe we'll live in a world that's a little more like Paddington's and we'll all be a little nicer to each other. But I love that ending just because it's all about sharing what you love with the people you love.
And they ramp all the way up, and the end sequence is another moment where I cry.
Every time, yeah.
But then they do give you a coda, like extra. So they know, like, oh, we probably shouldn't leave it at that. I mean, that's very profound, but something to ease it a little bit. And we get some scrapbooking with Aunt Lucy, with various like character updates. I love the fact that the Globe Theater is playing Macbeth, which is
again. Which neighbor pulled the strings to make it about bears? Like somebody got the plane for Aunt Lucy. Somebody got who works at the Globe? Was it Phoenix?
Yeah. This centuries old theater is going to adapt it for two bears who are around town. Like, sure. And then we find out that Phoenix gets 10 years for his crime.
The only sentence they can give, apparently. 10 years.
No 9, no 11, no month, no life. It's just 10 years if you got a crime. And we get a Busby Berkeley musical ending. You do enjoy the showstopper at the end?
Oh my God. I mean, that is another sequence like the barbershop that just keeps delivering and keeps getting better. I was like stunned in my seat in the theater when I watched that. It was because you don't even remember the stupid little dance he does for Mrs. Brown when they're in his apartment. Like you don't remember that at all. And then you immediately do when they do the whole production of it. Again, did not think Hugh Grant was capable of doing that. It was stunning. It was so fun. It brings together, puts a perfect bow on everything they've ever done for the prison to make it fun and awesome. Phoenix is forced to work with other people because his agent says he doesn't know how to do that. And he has to work with hundreds of other people, but he's still the star. It's just so earnest and fun and over the top, and it's delightful. It's the adjective I don't use to describe anything else.
Reserve it for Paddington 2. Yeah. You're going to need to dish it out often with this movie. And then we have a question here about any idea where Paddington 3 is at? And Paddington 3, apparently, just from doing some cursory searching online, is apparently on hold. And there's some different talent attached to it. So we'll see if it has the same quality that carried through 1 and 2. But because it is on hold and because not much is known about it, Liz, we can't answer that question. But how would you fill in? What's your Paddington 3? If you get to write it, what's your pitch?
Okay. My pitch for Paddington 3. Paddington, in the first Paddington, from what you have described to me, Paddington was sort of like a destructive force, kind of good-natured, good-intentioned, but destructive force trying to adjust to London.
Fish out of water.
Yes. Paddington 2, he's there, he's in it, but then something happens, he gets thrown in prison. We have just explained. Paddington 3, it feels like he's got to get thrown off kilter in a totally different way. I think it's time. Aunt Lucy just turned 100. Bears, that's a good old age for a bear. Feels like Aunt Lucy might have to say goodbye, but she sends someone to Paddington, and it's another cub that she's found. And Paddington has to have this like little sibling character, and they're maybe not as innately good-natured as Paddington, and they're causing more malicious trouble, and they didn't spend as much time with Aunt Lucy, so they don't know how to be a good cub. And Paddington has to learn how someone that he loves, because Aunt Lucy sent them to him and he feels responsible, but has to learn how to like teach and care for and kind of nurture someone that he is not easily well matched with. I don't know how this connects, but I have thought about it, and I tried to make the villain someone else. I thought Idris Elba might be a good villain, or Florence Pugh might be a good villain. But there is an answer, and it's not just my answer, it's the correct answer. The next villain for Paddington 3 must be Helena Bonham Carter.
She carries the Harry Potter resume. Mm-hmm. That's check. A good way in. That's a good way in.
British icon, check. Perfect amount of like weird whimsy stuff, check. Hates to shoot outside of London, check.
Goofy hair.
Yep, crazy hair. Hasn't been a baddie in a long time, but we know she can do it. Like she hasn't been a baddie since Harry Potter, but we know that she can do it.
Kind of a baddie in The Crown.
Oh, but she's so fun. I'm not a monarchist, but I will defend Margaret. Like, I mean, not really, because like she was whatever, we're live. I'm not gonna go into this, but was she a great person? No. Do I root for her on that show? Yes.
Right, and that's what you want. That's a Hugh Grant.
Exactly.
Not a great person, but still charming.
Root for them in the
charming.
context. Yes. So it's got to be her. I don't know what she does yet or why they're fighting, but
I think that's a very good plot. I like that a lot. Yeah. Okay. So the only thing left to do, since you have now written the next sequel to Paddington 3, is to find out whether or not you love movies. Were you aware that Proust had a younger sister named Becky?
I was not, but I love movies.
Well, you say you do. However, we have a test that can find out whether or not you do, because Becky developed a scientifically valid questionnaire to determine exactly that. Do you care to take the questionnaire?
No, I'm good. Yes, I want to take the questionnaire.
Really held on that joke for a while. Okay, let's go ahead and do it. Okay, Ms. Hynes, what was your first R-rated movie?
Does it have to have been in the theaters?
No.
No. Okay. Then I believe it was, because for a while my parents, when The Passion of the Christ came out, they were like, she should watch that. It's religious. And then they were like, no. I think it was The Ring. I think that my parents rented it on VHS, and then I snuck out of bed to watch it alone. I was, I guess, like 7 or 8, and I watched it. And it would have been better to watch it in theaters, because when you're watching it on VHS, that's sort of integral to the plot, and it was very scary. I think that was it.
When the mode of distribution is talking to you, it's gonna mess you up. That's why I never watched that. I can't remember. Forget it. Okay. What movie would you be compelled to buy, even though you may already own a copy of it, if you found it at Pickers Paradise and or Gruber's for $2?
For $2. I already have a movie that I have sort of accidentally done this with, that I must have found in like a Walmart when I still shopped at Walmart. Now I don't, out of protest, but they have very cheap movies. There was a movie that I must have bought multiple times. And when I showed up at college for the first time, when I was moving into my dorm, I realized I had not brought with me a single pen or a pencil. I went to a place where my only job was to go to school, and I brought neither of those things, but I did bring 3 copies of Mrs. Doubtfire on DVD. All in different bags. Like, I don't think I realized I packed all 3. I don't think I realized I had 3, but I had all of them and 0 pens.
Oh, I'll hand these out. I'll make friends.
Yep. You guys, it's when I come and watch Mrs. Doubtfire. I don't have any booze or drugs. Just
this will win them over. Okay.
So I would add to that collection.
What dorm were you, by the way, out of curiosity? This is not one of Becky's questions. I just don't know.
I was in Ryan.
Okay, got it.
I really lucked out.
Okay. What is the best movie to watch on a second date?
Second date. This is very subjective for me personally. The Lobster. That is one of my favorite movies. I don't go on that many dates, so if I go on a first date, I kind of think there's gonna be a second, but I don't want to like waste a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time, so The Lobster, one of my favorite movies.
I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah, I'm busy. I'm on the subway. There's no service there. I miss the subway weirdly.
Miss
But it
People.
is so, like, the movie is so specific. There's so many choices. I like the underlying things it makes you think about relationships, which I think would be interesting to talk about with someone you might be entering a relationship with. But also I think it's a good barometer for anyone, because as long as you're on the same page about the movie, some people love it, some people hate it, some people are like, I don't care about that movie. And if you and your prospective partner are on the same page about the movie, I think that's a good sign.
Got it. Sub question to question 4. What is your favorite topping or toppings on a pizza?
Fresh basil. It's easy. It's basic, but in like a way that's also kind of classic. And I find that it immediately just makes you feel fancier.
What is the best movie to watch while eating a basil pizza on the couch?
Ooh, okay. So basil is a tiny detail, but it adds so much. So I think you got to watch a Nancy Meyers movie, because it's all in the details. And if you just put a pizza with like one fresh ingredient and a glass of white wine, any kitchen is like a Nancy Meyers kitchen. And so I would watch It's Complicated on the couch and feel very fancy.
And lastly, you are 10 years old and you receive a screener from the future. What film most blows your mind?
Sorry to bother you, because I would not understand it at all, but I would get that it was trippy before I had language to describe that. And I would tell myself, not only are you going to appreciate this aesthetically, you're going to love all these actors, but you will understand the message of it and agree with it. And that would confuse me and blow my mind.
That would be, I mean, it blew minds. It blew like 30-year-old minds. So
Yeah. I love
what
that.
it might do to a 10-year-old is, it's fun to imagine. Oh, and say, oh, I have to do the calculations, enter the data. I'm uploading, I'm downloading it. Hey, turns out you love movies, Liz.
Yes.
You do. You do. And we loved having you on Zoom Back Camera to talk about movies. Thank you so much for coming on tonight's show.
I loved being here. Thank you so much, Ricky.
Well, thank you.
So fun.
Have a good night, everybody, and we hope to see you again soon on Zoom Back Camera. Bye now.